Welcome everybody to our Mondi Group e-commerce briefing. This webinar series aims to share broad insights from the whole supply chain of e-commerce. We're discussing packaging, market trends, sustainabilities, and automation. In today's episode, which I'm very happy to host on behalf of Nedim Nisic, we are going to talk with Liz Morel from RetailX, who we have conducted our very recent annual e-commerce trend report with. My name is Julie. I'm taking care of marketing and comms, and therefore it's my pleasure to welcome Liz with me. Would you like to start with a short introduction about yourself, please?
Hi, yes, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. So I'm one of the journalists that works across internet retailing and RetailX. And I am editor and writer for a lot of the different industry reports and white papers that the companies do. The RetailX side of the business is led by a team of researchers that analyse performance and data across the market, and then that is then used in our own reports and in customer research and so on as well.
So a real expert in the research, but also in the whole retail market and space. Very good. So we have been publishing our 5th report this year, the 2nd in collaboration with RetailX. Maybe you could talk us a little bit through the development of the report, the survey, and then also the white paper, which was based on it that you developed.
Yeah, so obviously we worked with you guys for the first time last year on the report, and it's really interesting, even in just the second year of working with you guys, how we've taken that report on. So this time we've gone bigger and better. We did 6 countries, 1,000 consumers in each country. So we looked at Czech Republic, France, Germany, Poland, Sweden, and Turkey. And those consumers are surveyed via an online survey. There's a broad split of equal demographics, gender and age splits within that, so that we've got a comprehensive sort of overview of the market as a whole.
Yeah, that's something I really do like about the report, that you can also go into the regional split, but also generational split. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this later. And as you absolutely rightly mentioned, it's our biggest report to date. We have never surveyed more end consumers, online shoppers. So it's really, really, really interesting read and very good to deep dive into it. Maybe let's get started already with a little bit high level finding of some key trends from the report, something you have identified based on the survey.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much insight coming out of this report that it's really hard to sort of summarize it in a few sentences. And that's the beautiful thing about this report, because it does look in depth into so many key areas that retailers are wanting to know about their consumers. So whether that's how they're shopping, what they're buying, how much they're spending, how they feel about returns, you know, their practices in social commerce and ReCommerce and so on. We dive into that in huge depth throughout the whole report. And there were some really interesting things in there. You know, we looked at the impact of inflation and so on as well. We looked at how often people are buying. We've got sort of a quarter buying at least once a week. And then, you know, we talked about the country splits. When we look by country there, you know, we see Turkish consumers were some of the most prevalent in terms of how regularly they buy at that level. So that was really interesting. We see in it the role of value and price and so on, and how influenced consumers are by that. And then the ReCommerce angle was really interesting, and one that's only just going to develop more and more. So we had kind of 1 in 3 consumers had bought or sold second-hand clothing, and that's the sort of strength of sites like Vinted and so on. And is obviously at the moment dominated by kind of millennials and Gen Z, but things like that we can see growing further. And then the impact of social commerce as well. I think 44% had bought via social commerce in the last 12 months. And that will just grow further as people are more comfortable with that way of shopping. And then it was issues around kind of returns and recycling were really interesting as well. And also this we looked at future expectations. We had consumers saying, in the future they want to be sort of reimbursed and rewarded for returning packaging and things like this. So there's some really key points in the survey. Definitely recommend kind of everybody downloads it and looks at it in more depth, because summarize it in a sort of few sentences like that is hard.
No, absolutely. And I think that's also the beauty of this report, that there is so much, like a real treasure hold of data. And what we have done with the report or with the survey, we split it into two topics. So on the one hand, we are asking online shoppers about their general online shopping behavior. And then we also asked them a little bit more about their sentiments towards e-commerce packaging. What are the expectations? What are they thinking about recyclability, reusability, and so on? Maybe let's start with social commerce. What is it? What did we find here? What was new to it? And why do we consider it as an e-commerce trend?
So with the social commerce questions in the report, we wanted to know how recently kind of customers had bought, so whether they bought through social media, and by that we meant seeing something on the social media platform and clicking through and buying it on that social media. So they're not influenced and then going off elsewhere. They're actually clicking through and buying. So we asked, who'd bought via social platform in the last 12 months. And there were some really interesting answers that across the different countries, we saw that it was highest for Turkey, like 60% of consumers in Turkey had bought in the last 12 months. And, again, obviously kind of millennials and Gen Z were the most intense users there. Like it was pretty much half of those had bought via social commerce. And it's just an indication of where retailers and brands need to be. They need to be on those platforms, and they need to be recognising that it isn't just an influencer anymore. It's a proper platform for buying, and they need to be reacting to that. So it was really interesting to see the different behaviours there, and especially kind of how that differed across the different markets.
No, totally agree. And also, as a millennial, I have to admit, social commerce got me for the first time last year as well. And now I'm kind of addicted to it because it is very, very easy and it's where you're at. So
yeah, exactly. And I'm the same. We looked again at the split between platforms where people are buying, and we saw Instagram was the heaviest. Mm-hmm. I don't do Instagram, but I do Facebook, and I've kind of ignored the social commerce ads for ages, and exactly like Eden now, they're getting me in now. I just can't stop, and now I'm like, no, please. But it's working, and I've done it now, and I trust it. Yes. And that's how that market develops. Young consumers are just doing it very naturally. So
absolutely. Looking towards the younger generation, the Gen Z and also the millennials, I think there is another trend mostly driven by them. Correct me if wrong, but the ReCommerce trend, that's also something coming more from the younger generations, right?
Yes, definitely.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the ReCommerce and what is meant by that, what we saw in our report, and how this might be shaping the future of e-commerce even to a certain degree?
So the idea of ReCommerce is the consumer buying or selling secondhand goods. And we've always had kind of eBay way back in the past, and people buying and shopping on that. But there's so many brands, so many retailers now offering kind of ReCommerce options. for kind of many different reasons. For some, it's sustainability and this idea of circularity, and improving their efforts in that sort of space. But it's also consumer demand as well. You know, they recognise that that's how and where consumers are shopping themselves, because they want to be able to behave kind of better as consumers. And it's becoming more mainstream. So we've got, like I mentioned earlier, Vinted. I mean, my 17-year-old daughter has just discovered Vinted, and I said to her, you know, well, would you go in a charity? Well, I'm not going in a charity shop. You know, that's secondhand. But it's a very kind of, you know, somebody like Vinted has marketed it so well that they're capturing this audience, and you know, and they're loving it, and there's value, you know, they've got great value, they've got great choice, and so on. So it's becoming such a massive thing in its own right. And when we looked at that, we looked at kind of the product split, and obviously clothing leads it. We'd expect to see that, I think. It was nearly a third of consumers had bought secondhand clothing. And obviously, again, it was the younger generations driving it, so millennials and Gen Z, around a third of them as well. But it's a really interesting kind of trend that, again, will just keep growing. And even looking at the country split of that is interesting as well. So, you know, it was relatively low in Czech Republic, for example, but in Poland we had like 43% of consumers had bought secondhand clothing in the last 12 months. So it's just, again, another market that will snowball, I think, as consumers get more conscious about their buying. And retailers and brands have to respond to that.
We also see this trend translated and being picked up by bigger brands. You mentioned Vinted, obviously, but then also H&M, Zalando. They have ReCommerce sections also in place at this point. So I also believe that this is a very, very growing trend that's still maybe in the Kinderschuhs at this point, but I think it's going to become even bigger. And the data is proving this to be a very good, accurate foresight.
Exactly, and I think it's really interesting because you know, there's just such a wider acceptance of it now. And you know, you mentioned a few of the brands there, but we've got kind of, you know, it's interesting to see traditional fast fashion retailers like H&M, for example. I mean, they've always had this very sort of sustainable outlook, but you know, we've got other brands sort of in the same stable that similar stable that are doing kind of similar things because they know they have to. You know, they know that they're having to change kind of what they're doing, how they're targeting, and how they're meeting the consumer needs. So it's really interesting, and yeah, again, another kind of key point of the report, I think.
Absolutely, and also the sentiment of brands towards sustainability. I think there was one fact also in the report that personally I really liked, that we asked how many online shoppers have seen online brands to become more sustainable, in particular in regards to their packaging. And I think it was 52% even who said that they are seeing those sustainability efforts coming from brands. So I think that's also something very optimistic, that you're doing something good, but also it's appreciated by the end consumer, and it's also seen by the end consumer.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. I would like to stay a little bit more on the sustainability topic. So when we are shifting gear and looking at the packaging aspect of it, here sustainability, we saw it also in our prior reports, has always been something extremely important, if not the most important priority to online shoppers, next to the product safety and product protection. Can you talk a little bit about what they expect and what is considered of a sustainable e-commerce packaging, and what the end consumer expect from brands?
I think, as you say, again, that's really important to them. We asked the importance of packaging aspects. I just say that's a question we've asked before, and we saw similar responses coming through. So it's protection first of all. There's no point getting a product through that's broken or damaged. But next to that, they're looking for environmentally friendly, sustainable packaging. They're looking for it to be easy to reseal for return shipment, and that's both from a sustainability point of view, but it's also convenience. If you've got something to return, I mean, I'm a nightmare at returns because they'll just sit on my table. So I need the retailer or brand to make it as easy for me as possible. And if I can just grab the package it came in, reseal it, and send it off, then that's a headache less for me. And it also means that I feel I'm behaving a little bit more responsibility because I'm reusing the packaging there. So where it wasn't reusable or they didn't have a reuse for it, they wanted it to be recyclable. They wanted it to be easy options to recycle and to reuse if they need to. And again, that's something we kind of look at in deeper.
Because we touched the topic of returns, there is this constant conversation about how to handle returns in e-commerce. It's like a big topic within the whole supply chain. It's a big topic also for online brands. We asked for the second year in a row if there is a willingness to even pay for returns. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So on the returns front, I mean, that's a constant question from retailers. They're looking to reduce consumer returns levels. They're looking to discourage that. So obviously we've seen various retailers introduce sort of paid returns and encouraging returns back to store rather than via the online channel. But that was really interesting again. So we looked at the split, and we saw a proportion that would say yes, they wanted to pay extra for returns sort of all the time, and it was around a sort of 30% third split for each. So you'd have around that number saying yes, you'd have those that said sometimes depending on what was ordered, and you'd get kind of around a third that was saying no, they're not going to pay. And that willingness, again, we see how it splits over generations and by country, but it's just a really interesting thing for retailers and brands to be embracing. They need to know whether their customers are going to fork out for returns and their willingness to kind of do so, because they have to get their returns rates down and their returns costs under control.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this might also be a good reminder for every online shopper, every consumer, each and every one of us who's shopping online. It's also part of sustainability to not go crazy in your online ordering and then returning most of it, to be very selective and making wise choices also when ordering online.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we were having a conversation recently, weren't we? And I was talking about the sort of returns behaviour of my teenagers, and they don't consider it at the moment, and they should be. They should be moving to that sort of more responsible returns behaviour, as everybody should, because
absolutely,
there's a cost to it financially, absolutely, environmentally. So.
Yeah. What do brands in worst case need to consider, or what could they face in case they are not shipping in packaging that comes conveniently in a sustainable material, easy to handle, easy to reuse or recycle for the end consumer? Is there anything they should be aware of that could directly influence their sales along the way?
Yeah, I mean, within the report, we asked whether consumers would not shop with retailers whose packaging fell into a specific category. So, for instance, oversized packaging or excess internal packaging, and those two things are a massive deal for consumers, because they will call retailers out on it. You know, we've seen so many social media kind of posts and sort of online arguments in the past, you know, pictures of a lipstick turning up in a giant box. You know, consumers call that out. It's not acceptable. You know, it's not viable for the retailer to carry anybody. And you know, and then it's just a pain for the consumer to have to get rid of this massive box that this tiny lipstick came in. And it does kind of real brand damage. And as we see in the question that we asked directly, it can put them off buying from that retailer again. So, you know, if you're doing something that's going to lose you sales, why would you? You know, you're not going to do that. So that was again really interesting. And you know, we had an element of consumers strongly agreeing with those statements. But you know, it's when you take that overall sentiment of you know, they agree or they strongly agree. You know, if you're losing whatever proportion of your consumers, it's you know, it's lost sales hindered by something you can pretty easily solve.
Absolutely. And I think because when I looked into the report, that was really something that really grabbed my attention, that still a big amount of consumers would not come back and shop again at a certain brand if they're disappointed by their packaging. I think this is something that can really not be underestimated, that it's the packaging, the first touch point with a brand. So it really gives the online shopper the first brand experience. And it's also like a make it or break it moment to a certain point when it comes to the overall online shopping experience. So this is really something I think that all brands should keep in mind, because it's very important, and also it can be easily fixed with fit for purpose and right sized packaging.
Exactly. I mean, as you say, you know, we had the whole sort of unboxing videos and stuff in the past, and perhaps they might not be as predominant as they were, but that touch point with the consumer, that feeling they get when they open the product, you know, is it presented nicely? Is it protected? Has it come as they wanted it to, or are they going to have to kind of phone up and ask for a return because the protection wasn't there, and they've got damaged product, or you know, kind of something that just doesn't make them feel good when they open it. So that, you know, that over packaging can ruin the unboxing experience and cost you sales, but there's very many other elements that can cost you sales as well. So
Absolutely. But the unboxing in particular, I think, has been last year again, or during our last survey again, but also in prior years, something that was very important to a lot of the online shoppers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, got the figures here. So, you know, we've got just over 40% saying it's important. There's another proportion there that say it's very important. You know, those that don't care about it, probably around a third, but you know, that leaves a large proportion who are influenced by what their packaging looks like and how it makes them feel when they open it. So, you know, they have to, retailers have to be kind of looking at how that influences their consumers and what they do.
Packaging and the unboxing is done right, this is going to give you just such a better feeling also for the brand and the whole experience and such. So
exactly, and it doesn't need to be all bows and ribbons, you know, far from that. It's just, like you said earlier, it's something that's fit for purpose, it's protected the product, it's been quite nice to open, you know, perhaps I can use that again for, I don't know, like sending a gift to somebody or something like that. You know, it's I can do something again with that packaging, and therefore I feel like I've behaved a bit more responsibly as a consumer when I've bought like that. So.
And Liz, we are already coming to the end of our time, but I would like to ask you one final question. When looking into all of the data and drafting the white paper for it, has there been anything in particular that you personally would either highly agree with or not agree with at all, or something that was really, really surprising? One finding that was unexpected for you?
I think what surprised me, and as I say, it shouldn't because I hinted at the behaviour of my teenagers earlier, but we looked into sort of whether consumers were recycling and reusing and so on. And within some of that, we found the behaviour of millennials and Gen Z sometimes goes against what we'd expect. You know, we expect and hear that they're very kind of environmentally driven and so on. But some of the behaviour that was coming through was actually different to what we'd expect. And so I think there's perhaps a warning for retailers and so on to actually really truly understand those consumers. You know, are they behaving as responsibly as we've always kind of thought they might? As I say, I know my teenagers aren't. They will order stuff online and not think about the returns, not think about the delivery cost. They just want it as soon as they can, but they can't be bothered to go to the shop to get it. So, you know, it was things like that, I think, that were coming through and will be interesting. So again, I think it's just another sort of pointer to retailers to go and look at this sort of research and you know, just check that assumptions and so on that have been made in the past are actually still applying, because there are surprises in this report and they're worth kind of digging out and looking at.
But for the time being, I would highly recommend everybody to get a copy of the report. It's for free. It's available in 5 different languages, and we are going to link to the download form of it. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, read into it. I think it's really of high value to understand the online shopper better and also to get a good understanding of the e-commerce market and where it's heading. Liz, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me for this webinar today and sharing all of this valuable insights, key findings, and trends. And I'm very excited to stay in touch and exchange also in the future key findings of the e-commerce market with you.
Yeah, no, I just agree with that. That you know, it's more than a 30-odd page report, but it's divided up into very easy to digest sections. So yeah, grab a few cups of coffee and a few little sessions and digest the findings in there, because yeah, there's a lot of information.
And in case of any questions, we are always here from Mondi, of course, to support you with your online packaging and beyond. And if you have detailed questions on a report, I'm also happy to get you in touch with Liz, who can then also shed light on any open questions there might still be. Thanks, everybody, and good to see you in the next webinar series for the Mondi Group e-commerce briefing. We will be back with Nadim Nisic, and have a wonderful rest of the day.